Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Playmakers. What's up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be doing another mock draft. And in today's mock, it's going to be a 10-team league. This is going to be PPR scoring, but there's a little bit of a twist. So you're getting a point per every reception, but running backs also get 0.25 points for every carry. Well, this would also apply to wide receivers, but obviously it's much more beneficial for the running back position. So I'm someone who likes to go running backs early and often already, but with this format, running backs getting 0.25 points for every carry, these running backs are likely going to fly off the board even more than they normally do. And we're going to be drafting from the second overall pick, and then the roster is still very standard. One quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, a tight end, one flex, defense, kicker, and then 7 bench slots. And let's get right into the draft. So unsurprisingly, we saw Christian McCaffrey go off the board at the 101. And for our pick, there is no doubt that we are going to go with a running back here. The question really is just who. And I think I'm going to be choosing between 3 different options here. It's going to be Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, and Derrick Henry. I think Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry have a decent amount of competition. Henry definitely gets a bump because he's obviously going to get more carries than Alvin Kamara. I mean, that could be like a 1.5 point cushion per game just because of those extra carries he's getting. But in the same way, Alvin Kamara has much higher receiving upside than Derrick Henry, so I think they're both battling there. I think I would honestly lean Derrick Henry just because he does have that safety, and even though it is PPR, those carries per game are really going to help him out. But I think the top guy here would be Dalvin Cook. He's going to come close to Derrick Henry in terms of carries per game, but he also just has so much more receiving upside than Derrick Henry does. So I'm going to go with Dalvin Cook to be my RB1. And then, hopefully we have a quality RB2 that falls to us with our second round pick. So like I expected, we just saw a ton of running backs come off the board in the first 2 rounds. So Devontae Adams was the only wide receiver picked in the first, and then Stephon Diggs and Tyreek Hill were the only wide receivers picked in the second. And so that leads into our pick here at the 209. We already have our first workhorse running back, and there's probably going to be 3 different avenues that we could go with this pick. The first one is obviously go out and get another running back. The second would be draft a wide receiver 1. And then the third would be pick Travis Kelce, who is still available. I honestly think I'm going to be fading wide receiver here just because I think the value is going to be so good later in the rounds, especially since everyone is going running backs so early. But this is going to be a pretty tough call here between a running back and Travis Kelce. Kelce is going to give you that positional advantage, but I definitely like Chris Carson more than the rest of the field here. My pick in the third round is going to be after the guy with the first round pick picks twice. So, the question is he going to go with Kelce? Is he going to go with 2 of these running backs? The good thing is that these top 3 guys available, Carson, Montgomery, and James Robinson, I think all of those guys are going to have very solid volume, which obviously helps when they're getting 0.25 points per carry. So I may just pull the trigger on Travis Kelce here, get that positional advantage at the tight end slot. It is still PPR, so it's not way skewed towards running backs. And then I think there's still going to be some solid options on the board for running back with my next pick. So that's what I'm going to go here, get my tight end 1. This is definitely a little bit of a risky approach, but let's just see how it turns out. All right, so the first overall pick team went with Chris Carson and then Deandre Hopkins, and this is going to be our third round pick. I think we've just got to go with a running back here because if we wait till the 4th round, it's probably going to be slim pickings at that position. And I think this is pretty clearly a David Montgomery pick. I think he's going to have a lot of volume this year. I'm continuing to get higher and higher on him just because, all the guys that seem to be competition from this year, Tariq Cohen, Damian Williams, it just hasn't gone well for those guys. Damian Williams has just straight up struggled in the preseason. Cohen still can't get on the field from that ACL injury. So it looks like David Montgomery is just going to continue from where he left off. So I'm going to pull the trigger here. A lot of volume and a very safe running back 2 option. So in the 3rd round, it looks like a lot of these teams went running back early and now started to go with some other positions, mainly wide receiver, some tight ends thrown in there. So lucky for us, we may be able to scoop up a very solid running back 3 because it is a very viable play to throw a running back in your flex spot because they're getting those extra carries. If you have a running back that's getting, say, 16 carries a game, that's a 4-point advantage over just a wide receiver. So there's a ton of value there. So I think with this pick, we're either going to be going running back or getting our first wide receiver. So let's just see where the value is at. Hopefully there's still some solid running backs since I think only one guy got picked since our third round selection. And so on the board, we have Miles Sanders, Josh Jacobs, Mike Davis, Darrell Henderson. Still some very solid options here. I actually think I'm going to go with my wide receiver 1 on this pick because the guy after me already has 2 running backs. He's probably only going to pick 1, and I feel decently confident that Mike Davis is not going to be picked, and he's the guy I'd be picking here. I think he's going to have a lot of volume on this Falcons offense. He's going to be the workhorse running back, so I think he's very safe and is a perfect pick for this type of format. So I'm going to go with Amari Cooper here as my wide receiver 1. He's the clear top option left on the board in my opinion. And then I'm going to hope that Mike Davis is not selected so I can go out and get him in the 5th round. All right, so that first overall pick team did go with a running back, but it was Miles Sanders. And then they went with Lamar Jackson at the 501. So our boy Mike Davis still on the board. I think this is really the opportunity to go out, snag him as my running back 3. I think there should be some decent value at wide receiver. Hopefully, honestly, we could get to the point where like all these guys from like 16 to 24 are gone and we're picking from Odell, Claypool. That would definitely be unfortunate, but I do think it's a risk we have to take because we do not want to be left, without some of these top running backs. So this is where I'm going to go with Mike Davis. So after we picked Mike Davis, in the 5th round, we saw a lot of wide receivers come off the board with Josh Allen and Chase Edmonds thrown in there. And then the 6th round, still a decent amount of wide receivers. We saw some of these second-tier tight ends come off. Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, a pair of running backs with Darrell Henderson and Josh Jacobs. So now this is our 6th round pick, and there's a few avenues that we can go with this pick. We could go out, get our QB1 in Dak Prescott. There's another option here where we go out and get our 4th running back. And I know that may seem crazy just because we only have 1 wide receiver, but this is the way I'm looking at it. Playing a running back in your flex is so valuable because of that point differential I talked about, right? Like if I'm trying to choose between playing Gus Edwards in my flex and a guy like Odell or Claypool, Gus Edwards is going to be getting 3 extra points just from those carries because I expect him to be around like 12 carries per game. So that's definitely something to consider. But I also want to look at the draft board to see what this guy's roster who picks after me looks like. So he already has 3 running backs. I'm going to guess that they're going to go at least 1 wide receiver, maybe even 2. So I don't know if we need to go get Gus Edwards right here. I think he's being undervalued and probably should have already been picked. And so I think we're going to be able to go maybe with Dak Prescott, maybe a wide receiver, and then hope that Edwards falls. When I'm looking at these wide receivers, this is just the range that I do not like to be picking in. Like Odell, Claypool, Juju. I feel like this is the range where these guys have to hit for you. Like they're going to be in my starting lineup, but I just don't feel confident pulling the trigger on them. So I do think I may go with Dak Prescott here, get that Cowboys stack with him and Amari Cooper. I'm just totally buying in to this Cowboys offense. The injury concerns, are not great, but it looks like he's not really restricted anymore, and so he should just go out and absolutely ball out this year. So this team 1 did actually go out and get a running back. They got Myles Gaskin and then also Robbie Anderson, but lucky for us, it was not who we were interested in Gus Edwards. And I do think I just need to talk through this because this is kind of a risk here. We're going out getting a 4th running back. We only have 1 wide receiver, but this is the way I'm looking at it. Your running backs are going to have bye weeks, and playing running backs in that flex slot is so crucial that if I have 4 top guys, that makes me feel way more confident. I don't have to go to the running back position for at least probably like 3-4 more rounds. I can take a bunch of swings at the wide receiver slot, and I feel confident that I can draft at least 1 guy who's going to be a serviceable wide receiver too. I'm really hoping that Antonio Brown is able to fall to our next pick because he's a guy that I really like targeting in that range. But this is a risk that I'm willing to take. I'm going to go with Gus Edwards, really just establish that security in our running back room, and then I'll have to just make up for it at the wide receiver position later on in the draft. So after we picked Gus Edwards, the 7th round was filled with running backs, wide receivers, and quarterbacks. Then the 8th round was just dominated by wide receivers, excluding Damian Harris, who was thrown in there. And now we have our 8th round pick, and I do not believe that I saw Antonio Brown be picked. So that is great news for us. I mean, if he is our wide receiver 2 this late in the draft, I will buy into that value every single day. When I'm just looking at this Bucs wide receiver room, I think all these guys are going to be involved, but I would so much rather buy Antonio Brown at like his 8th, 9th round price than go out and get Evans or Godwin, who are going in like the third or fourth round. I think there's a chance that he puts up very similar numbers to those guys. Just watching the first few drives, I mean, he's just going to be hitting everyone. They're all so talented, and I still think AB is much closer to his like prime form than he is to just being a washed up guy. So I'm going to slot him here as my wide receiver 2, and that makes me feel way better about this team. After we picked Antonio Brown, we saw Tyler Boyd and Courtland Sutton come off the board. I may have been interested in Courtland Sutton there, but that's definitely not a deal breaker. With this pick, we just got to go back to the well at the wide receiver position. We only have 2 guys right now. Our entire starting lineup is filled up, so we're just locking in on wide receiver. And I'm honestly looking at Laviska Shenault here. I think this is probably between like Will Fuller and Laviska, and I'm someone who has not been high on this Jacksonville Jaguars offense, but just watching them play in their most recent preseason game, it seems like Trevor Lawrence just has the most chemistry with Laviska. He had a very nice, kind of under-the-radar rookie season, 600 yards, 5 touchdowns in 14 games, 79 targets, 58 receptions, and that was just on a terrible offense. They still may not be great, but if he improves and he is the wide receiver 1, which it seems like he's kind of breaking out to be, then I think he could be a good pick here. I mean, Will Fuller, we could take that swing, but I do think he is very risky, and we kind of need to rely on this guy as our wide receiver 3. Chark's up here. I think Laviska is going to be better than Chark. Landry maybe, but he just has no ceiling. So I think Laviska is going to be the pick here. I don't love the value, but I do think he is the best wide receiver on the board. I also forgot to mention for Laviska that he's actually a guy that could get a few carries, just the way they use him. So that's just kind of a little bit of a cherry on top. Obviously, that's not the factor that, made me want to pick him, but it's just a little extra thing you could throw in there. I mean, the wide receivers are just flying off the board. You've got some running backs mixed in here, Mostert, Johnson, Sermon, Ronald Jones, Carter, but the rest of the picks were all at the wide receiver position. Hopefully there are still some decent options because we do need to go out and get our wide receiver 4. I'm very surprised that Justin Herbert is still on the board. That's going to be crazy value for whoever's picking him. We don't really need to worry about running back. We have 4 locked in solid guys. Tight end, Travis Kelce, we don't need to draft another one. So wide receiver it is. And just looking at these players, we've got Darnell Mooney, Devontae Parker, McCole Hardman, Russell Gage, Cole Beasley. We can see Marquez Callaway way down on this list. I'm just going to read off the names that I'm semi-interested in. Darnell Mooney, potentially. I like the player. I like the talent. I just don't know if he's going to have the right role in this offense and if they're going to be able to support him. Russell Gage, I like him. Beasley, I like him. Jacoby Myers, I'm also coming around on him, especially if Mac Jones is announced as the quarterback. But when I'm recording this, we do not know if that's the case. But I really think on this pick, I'm going to pull the trigger on Marquez Callaway. He may not get picked in the next 2 slots using this like Fantasy Pros database, but I'd rather just go out. This is the pick that I'd probably be making in a real draft. So, even if they consider it a little bit of a reach, I don't really care because I think he is the best wide receiver available. The first overall pick went with Cole Beasley and then Naheem Hines. Beasley was a guy that we were considering here, so he is going to be off our board. Let's just take another look at these wide receivers because I think we're still locked into that position. Right now, we're at 4 running backs, 4 wide receivers. I may just take a look to see where Alexander Madison is. Yeah, he's probably not going to be picked, within the next round. So I think we can wait. I do just want to grab him as that kind of handcuff back. But looking at the wide receivers, we're basically choosing between the same guys. Is it Mooney? Is it Gage? Is it Jacoby Myers? I think I'm going to go with Russell Gage. I think he has a decent mix of safety and upside. I mean, just his season last year would have kind of sufficed as a wide receiver 5, but I do think he's stepping into a more important role. He has another year of NFL experience. Still almost put up 800 yards last year, 5 touchdowns, operating as the wide receiver 3 for like half the season. So I can see the potential, and that's where I'm going to go for my wide receiver 5. We started to see some tight ends come off the board again. Then we also saw the last 2 teams who did not have a quarterback go out and get Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts. I mean, Justin Herbert in the 12th round is absurd. I don't think there's any shot that happens in real drafts, but for this, that is crazy value. Then we saw Fant and Jonnu Smith close out the 12th round here, leading into our pick at the 12:09. So within these next 2 picks, we're going to need to go out and snag Alexander Madison. And then we're also going to need at least 1 more wide receiver. And just looking at these guys available, I don't like a lot of these top options. Some of my favorite guys are farther down the list. Terrace Marshall maybe, Brian Edwards, even a guy like Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I think he may be my favorite guy available. But the thing is, there's no way he's drafted within the next 2 rounds. I think we could get him with our last pick overall. And so I'm going to kind of shake this up a little bit. I'm going to go out and snag Tom Brady at quarterback just because the value is too good there. Then I'm going to be able to go out and get Alexander Madison in the next round. And then I can wait and then draft MVS to be our last bench slot. I just don't think you're going to find a quarterback this good going this late. Obviously, it's because everyone else has a starter, but I still think I'd rather just go after this value. So Sterling Shepard was the last pick of the 12th round, and then Robert Tonyan started off the 13th. I was never really sweating Alexander Madison getting picked, so let's just lock him up here. Obviously, it's a little bit of a reach, but I just don't want one of these teams to go out and steal our handcuff, because then it's just a pain. You're kind of either waiting for them to drop them, or you're trying to trade for a dude that basically has no value unless Cook gets hurt. So that's why we just want to secure him here, because he is our workhorse. And if Cook goes down, Madison, can at least replace a little bit of that role. So the picks in the 13th and 14th rounds were just all over. Multiple guys from every position coming off the board. We have our 14th round pick here. And like I mentioned, this is going to be a wide receiver. We do only have 5 running backs. That's totally fine. I forgot we picked Madison. 5, perfect number, especially when 4 or you just feel crazy confident in. Right now, we have, I believe it is 5 wide receivers: Gage, Callaway, Chenault, Antonio Brown, and Amari Cooper. Yep. So we probably want to go out and get our 6th guy here. And I mentioned some names earlier, but I'm going to go with Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And this may seem like a gross pick, but the Packers desperately need a wide receiver too. And I do think MVS is talented enough to take over that role. He had a solid season last year. I believe he finished in like the 40s in terms of total points at the wide receiver position. Obviously, he was much worse on a points per game basis, but almost had 700 yards, caught I think it was like 5 touchdowns in 16 games. He didn't light up the score sheet, but there was definitely potential, and it may seem, counterintuitive, but I saw that potential in how many drops he had. He had 9 drops, I believe it was, first highest drop rate in the NFL, but he still put together a decent season and was still managing to get himself on the field. If he can fix that drops issue, it seems like him and Aaron Rodgers have been working very well this offseason. If he can truly emerge as that wide receiver 2 on this team, he is a great deep threat. 20.9 yards per reception. That's absurd. So I'm just going to take a big swing here. And if he goes out, sucks it up at the beginning of the year, who cares? I'll just go out and snag someone off of waivers. So after we went with MVS, this first pick team went with Everett and the Los Angeles Rams defense. So these are our last 2 picks. It's going to be defense and kicker. I'm going to go with kicker first just because I stream defenses. I'd rather just go out and get a top kicker and then just pick up, the best defense on a week-to-week basis who is playing a bad team. So just looking at the kickers available, just going to go with the top guy. Looks like it is going to be Justin Tucker. So that is going to be the pick. Obviously just a great kicker attached to a high-scoring Ravens offense. That's really the most important thing. You just want a kicker that's going to be scoring a lot of points because either they're going to be in field goal range a lot or your team is going to be scoring touchdowns and they're going to be kicking extra points. So Tucker's the guy here. And then we'll just have to wait to see what is the best defense available for our pick. For the defenses, we've got the Bills, Chiefs, Saints available. I'm just going to go with the Bills, the best ranked one on here. I'm not sure who their week 1 matchup is, but once we get close to the season, I'll just, be drafting whatever defense has a very good week 1 matchup. But just for the sake of this, we'll go Bills Mafia defense right here. All right, so this is going to be our final roster. Don't pay attention to the grade. Just grade you on how well you follow their ADP. Keep in mind, this was PPR scoring with 0.25 points for every carry, so very running back focused. And I really like how this team turned out. We've got Dak at quarterback, very solid, mid to high end QB1. We've got Dalvin Cook, one of the top workhorses in the game. David Montgomery is a very solid RB2. Cooper and Brown, not the strongest wide receiver duo, but it's solid. Best tight end in the NFL for fantasy. And then Mike Davis and Gus Edwards. I think those 2 guys are just key to this team because they're not super flashy players. They may not have the highest ceilings in, other formats, but Gus Edwards basically gets all his production from the ground. So he's going to be getting probably, 12 to 14 carries a game. That's like 3 extra points for you. Mike Davis as well, going to have a lot of volume on the ground. And then we just went with a ton of wide receivers on our bench. Laviska, Callaway, Valdez-Scantling, Gage. These are guys who have a decent amount of ceiling. And then finished it off with Tom Brady as a backup QB and our handcuff Alexander Madison. So I really like how this turned out. If you guys want to see more drafts with different types of formats, let me know what kind of drafts you guys want to see down below. I'll try to do as many of those as I can. Let me know what you guys think of this team. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. But I really appreciate you guys staying till the end, and I'll see you guys next time.